Hey everybody, thanks for joining me here and thanks for checking out my podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the notification bell for new episodes. You can also find Shine Without Shame on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Zooming out to the feminine, the feminine, and what that means to you, I would love to hear, because I think our society has, well, currently, especially in the Western part in the States, there's a lot of talk about, gender and feminine and masculine. But from what I gather, when you talk about the feminine, it's kind of beyond, it is about the body, but it's kind of beyond the body. And I don't know, I'm wondering if there's anything you can share that you think would maybe expand people's understanding of what encompasses the feminine, because I think it's more profound than maybe we give it credit to. And the same with the masculine, of course. But since you're doing work within the feminine, I imagine that's what you would be able to speak to the most. Anything that you want to say about it, and then maybe also connecting to what we're seeing in Iran and other parts, of the world, just like real time right now with the feminine, and where there may be a disconnect and understanding what is the feminine and what its value is.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love this question, and I could talk about it for I know more time than we have today. So I will try to keep it as focused as possible. And I will zoom out. I just have to start sort of from my own grappling with it, because I will tell you that there was a long period in my life where I did not want to be a woman. I did not want to be in my body. I did not feel comfortable, after puberty and with all the changes. And I never had a framework to understand why I was so terrified, why I had so much shame, why I really had so much self-hate as a woman. And it has taken many, many years of uncovering that and looking at those lies and looking at my own family patterns of behavior and trauma. But on the good side of all of that was, the spirit of my mother has always been a guiding light in my life. She had her own struggles, to be sure, but she really instilled into me a sense of the divine feminine, a sense of being a woman of faith as the most precious gift. And she meant faith, as you're talking about the feminine, like with the capital F, like, faith in its natural, essential form, not necessarily religious faith. Um, and uh, and she was very much a feminist or a womanist in her guidance to me. She loved people of all backgrounds, and she taught me that the essence of our work here, whatever calling you have, whatever vocation, but the essence is really this relationship that we have with each other, and fostering and nurturing those relationships with ourselves, with our, creator, creatrix, and then with each other as humans and Mother Earth. So my mother really helped me understand that the feminine is an energy, it's a spiritual reality, it's a groundedness, a rootedness, and it's, for me, the word mystery, is very much associated with the feminine. It is not always knowing logically, how things work or where things are going, but having a much more global, cosmic, I guess, understanding of the mystery of existence and the beauty of existence. Um, and uh, and so I believe that everyone has a feminine part of themselves, energy in themselves. And I think feminine really is beyond the binary. It's accessible and needs to be accessed by all people. And part of the blockage and the obstacles and the challenges in the world is that the feminine has been stifled and cut off and ignored and put into these boxes that do not really give our souls and spirits room to breathe and room to be. Whether that's work culture or religious institutions or political systems, and you can see it across the board. And it's all, of course, also intersectional. I mean, it intersects with class and race, and so discussions about the feminine are going to bring up all of it, which I love. It encompasses everything. It's not just gender. It's not just sexual orientation. It's not just me as a woman speaking about my own experiences. But it is so connected to everything we see happening in the world. And so, when I hear the cries of my sisters in Iran and now across the world chanting for women, life, and freedom, I have chills. I feel like, oh my God, this is the moment I have been waiting for my entire life and maybe preparing for, so that I can personally meet the moment as a woman without those veils of self-hate and shame, because we may not wear veils in the West in the same way unless you choose to, which is different. But I'm talking about the self-imposed, not self-imposed, the externally imposed veils that a lot of women are chafing against and saying, I don't want to wear a headscarf. I don't choose that. But I've had my own veils to lift. And I think men have their veils as well. And so if we can all commit to our own work of lifting those veils that have restricted us, I feel like that is in so much of what the feminine is calling us to be, really who we are in our essence, with each other, not only alone secretly in our own rooms, but in our workplaces, in our families, in places where we do not feel safe being ourselves, or where it's actually dangerous. So I hope I touched on your question. That's sort of yeah, for me, I think the more global aspect of the feminine.
Yes, you certainly touched on it and beautifully articulated a way that we can think about the feminine that is just, it's freeing, it's truly natural. It's it's not something that we have to create, and that's I mean, it just exists, as you were articulating earlier. And it is mysterious in my opinion as well. It seems like, I've said this before on the podcast, it seems like fear is at the heart of so many of our troubles. I used to think that the opposite of love was hate. And I think that was, that was like a message. I grew up in the 80s. I'm a child of the 80s. And that was when we started to think a little bit more globally. And there was this messaging of like, love, don't hate. And it's like, okay, yeah, it's an important message, especially when you're a child. But as I've gotten older and as my thinking has become deeper, and I've read and I've reflected and talked to people, I'm recognizing that fear really is the opposite of love. Anything, any place, any situation where there isn't love. And I know that's such a lofty word, sometimes maybe fluffy for people, but just that true connection to all of life and feeling cherishing and appreciating who we are and what we are in the world, and wanting to connect with people and share that appreciation. If that's not present, then I always think, is it fear that's at the heart that's keeping people, a group, a community, a personal, individual, keeping us from connecting? And so as you were talking about the feminine, and even talking about what's going on, in Iran, but around the world, and in response to this oppressive and not new, but collectively kind of on all of our radar, this moment, it's think, oh gosh, it must be fear. That's what I go to. I know that seems so simple, but I'm talking about the kernel. It must be fear that is keeping women and anyone else who is a part of, a place of oppression, a system of oppression, from truly thriving. And that is, of course, it can be a conversation in and of itself, but I always like to distill it in my mind, like, what's at the heart of it? And this is, a fear that goes back centuries, millennia, and that is influencing where we're at now in every realm of life, and in our society, and our structures, and our institutions. And so I'm really interested too in the work of dismantling that fear, and also not just dismantling it because that would be the right thing to do, but I think, as I was pointing out earlier, it's a deep appreciation for wanting people to look what happens when we remove this negative this negative kind of poison or disease. Everybody wins, everybody thrives, everybody can be truly happy. And that sounds so wonderful. I know it's the process that I care about. How do we get there? Let's do it together. And so I had a lot of thoughts come to me as you were sharing your perceptions and your insights, about what's going on with the feminine, what it is in its essence, but also where it is kind of at in the world in terms of our perceptions. So I think for me personally, that's a big part of my calling. It's kind of help remove the fear, but also say, but look what happens when it goes away, right? This is about all of us. This isn't just about the women and me as a woman, although that is an important kind of it's an important part of, I guess, that cascade, or the the evolution. There's certain, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a really good metaphor. Like dominoes came to mind, but I don't know if that's really what I want. But whatever this kind of project we're working on, whatever this is, there are certain places that are going to probably need to be addressed first, or given more support. Maybe it's a building, that's the metaphor, I don't know, but something has to happen when it comes to women. And men are part of the process, but different work, depending on the culture. The feminine culture requires different work, although men are a part of that process. So it's a joy to me to get to speak to you and to get to hear what you're doing, and just to know someone else in the world is thinking about this and cares. And I just thought I would ask if there are any thoughts that you want to leave people with, if there are any words of wisdom, any insights, maybe even a poem, anything that you want to share to encourage people to continue the journey, or maybe take the first step of healing, of embracing, I guess, truth, or even just exploring what is the truth that is the most meaningful, the most powerful, the most unifying and healing. I just want to give you an opportunity to share with the audience whatever you'd like to share with them and leave them with today.
Oh my goodness. Well, so much has, been sparked by this conversation, and a couple of things come to mind. I think a lot of the work that I do really comes down to, in the Baha'i writings, there is a book called The Hidden Words, and in this, the second hidden word talks about justice, and it's given me something to work towards, and sort of a um, guiding light, in my own life. And it says, the best beloved in my sight is justice, and through it you will see with your own eyes and not through the eyes of others. And so I guess what I encourage and what I'm trying to do myself is, when there are those disconnects or those places where there is fear either blocking you or there's some blockage in your community, really start to interact with the people who are facing that fear or who you are afraid of, or kind of going into that a little bit, because we all know that once we often face those fears, they either dissolve, we're able to see something human within them. And so I'll give you a very concrete example, which is, after I spent some time abroad, I was able to look with new eyes back at the United States. And, of course, what I had to look at was a system of continued racial injustice, slavery by another name, Jim Crow by another name, mass incarceration. And I couldn't sit with myself if I read articles about it and said, oh, that's really terrible, but didn't somehow put my own self into that arena, and and meet people who had been incarcerated or who were incarcerated or who are in or who are affected by incarceration, and and so beginning that process just really in a very small way in my own life then led to sort of breakthroughs for myself, because and with regards to the feminine, one of the most profound experiences I remember having was in a maximum security jail in Tennessee, and it was a male facilities. These were all men, and I had been asking them to be pretty vulnerable and bring in, things to share and poetry, and they were wonderful. They really showed up for the class. But at one point, a couple of the students asked me, they're like, "Well, we want to know about you. We've shared about us, but we're interested in like why are you here? Basically." And I'm like, "Well, fair point. Of course I shouldn't ask you to say things I'm not comfortable sharing." So I did. I brought in some writing, some poetry. I shared with them an experience I'd had as a child in Israel, and the level of fear that I lived with in that environment, where there was political conflict, there were suicide bombers, there was governmental oppression, all kinds of things that as a child I soaked in, and then later I didn't know what to do with. And and so sharing with them that I had lived in environments that were very fear laden and heavy, and that affected my soul at that young age deeply. I just remember feeling so seen by these men. One of them said to me, "Oh, okay, like now we understand why you're here. Like now we understand why you get us." And I was so humbled by that comment, because I would never presume, never ever in a million years presume that I understood someone else's experience, especially when it is so polar opposite from mine. I didn't grow up in, you know, a neighborhood where there was gun violence on a regular basis, or gang violence. So for these, you know, guys to say to me, okay, we get it, um, was, like I said, extremely humbling and validating. So that's what I mean when you sort of start to step into that arena. These gifts come to you, and, you know, these connections where we've struggled with these blockages of fear in all of our lives. And when we can share that with each other and say, okay, your fear might may be completely different from the fear I had to deal with as a child on the surface. But when you drill down, it is a very similar fear. And, you know, surviving that and moving past that, and then being in community together and celebrating that we did make it through, or we're trying to make it through, or maybe we haven't made it through, but someone's going to reach out a hand and say, I believe in you, you can make it through, is, you know, for me, like, those are the, you talk about shining, and for me, those are like the shining moments, you know, where that connection happens, um, through the fear, through the distrust, through the, you know, uh, the barriers that we erect around ourselves out of self-defense, you know, and protectiveness. And once those kind of start to open a little bit, really miraculous things can happen. Um, but we also have to be open to the floodgates of grief and sadness, and taking responsibility and account, for our own actions and for things, you know, that historically have happened. So it's, yeah, it's a whole, um, like you said, it's a holistic process. But if there's one thing I would leave people with, it is that seeing things with your own eyes, looking at people in the eye, you know, listening to them with a really open heart, even if you don't understand or don't feel like you have, um, the same experience, um, and finding people who will listen to you, because that's also really important. It really is important. It's important to be validated for who you are and what you've gone through, and the things you've struggled with and wrestled with are valid and real. And validating that in yourself is a huge step to healing. Um, so again, just like the self-healing, the seeing yourself, listening to yourself, and then, you know, being in circles and in communities where you can do that with others, like, that is what I encourage. I do.
That is wonderful. That is such a simple yet profound reminder of how we can think about living our lives in sort of a framework. You know,
Yeah.
people have their own needs and their own challenges, and they're in, you know, everyone's in a different kind of environment, but community is something I think we can all, maybe there are some extreme situations where it's not really easy, but even one other person is community. Or
Mm-hmm.
to your point, start with yourself. That's community.
Mm-hmm.
That's community. And then it is, it's the mystery of life, but we've all experienced those things that you just don't understand how they manifested, how they worked out. But when you genuinely are on a path and you have a desire, a goal for something profound to happen in your life. I'm not talking about win $1 million, though maybe for some people that would be genuinely a profound thing that would be
Mm-hmm.
helpful for their journey. But it could be something small yet meaningful. And when you start to put that out there in the world, it's amazing how it comes together. Things do come to you. Maybe it doesn't look exactly the way
Right. Right.
you might have thought about it or dreamt about it, but the essence of it is real. And I think there are so many people that feel lonely,
Mm-hmm.
that feel isolated. They are isolated for all different sorts of reasons. And it's like, if you can start like you said, with loving yourself, or that starting with that self-acceptance. I'm here for a reason.
Mhm.
I must be here for a reason. Otherwise, why? And, and then take those steps to really begin to embrace self-love. You do start to attract different people, new people, people that who really do see you, who do understand, who are like-minded and like-hearted, as you said. And it does just start, I think, with here,
Mhm.
ourselves, and then we can create a realm, grow a realm around us that
Mhm.
is ripe for community building and in all sorts of ways. So I so appreciate you bringing us back to that important, essential aspect of life. Otherwise, it just feels too overwhelming and too challenging.
Mhm. Yeah.
So thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. I just wanted to make a little quick side note, which is I think a lot of talk about like therapy or self-acceptance or, the inner work. Sometimes it comes with a bit of a, um, I don't know, a judgment over it that like you have to be wealthy or you have to have means or resources, right, to be able to do this work. And there's some truth to that. Like, absolutely. Like, there's some truth to having some ability to get, certain forms of therapy. And you have to pay for these things. But there are a lot of resources and a lot that can be done. Like you said, either with one other person, with a friend, with yourself, in nature. And so I just want to just be clear that this work is for everybody and it's accessible to everybody. And I think the most important ingredient is your desire. Your like you said, your quality of heart. Just saying, yes, I am here, and I want to be here. So I just wanted to mention that.
That's so important. Thank you for adding that. And that's been said several times on the podcast, emphasize,
Mm.
underline, and so thank
Mhm.
you. You're right on time, right on track, that it's not about spending thousands of dollars or needing to have that. Although sometimes you can find that the therapy, the right kind of therapy for you with, that requires very little means. Sometimes there's free. So yes, but it is true. Some people have the kinds of burdens and trauma that does require some expertise, and not that has
For
to
sure.
cost loads of money, but sometimes you can't get to the core of it without someone who knows how to get you there. But to your point, that can look all kinds of ways. So thank you for
Mm.
emphasizing that once again here.
Mm.
And thank you so much. This has been so inspiring and rich. I feel like my heart chakra was just open, ready to
Mm.
receive and to give with you. So I hope that people listening, people
Mm.
watching have been, inspired and touched, and maybe reminded of something that they had once thought about in terms of something they wanted to accomplish or part of their journey they wanted to explore. And hopefully this will be a good reminder, or
Mm.
even just encouraging. Well, Andréana, as I always do, I end the podcast conversation with each guest asking them if there's a television show, new or old, that you would recommend. Which one is it and why?
Such a great question. And I was thinking, because you kindly sent me this question, and I was kind of thinking about it. And I really have to go with my gut and also kind of what's latest on my watch list, because it's freshest in my mind. So there are two shows that were very entertaining, just on a purely just enjoyable, level of entertainment. But I also felt like they were getting to some of the racial, gender, social justice realities that we are grappling with as, as a society. So I really appreciate those like layers where it's like you can enjoy this and you can have fun. Um, and not that there's like a hidden message, because it was pretty much on the surface, but it was like, but this is life. Like this is what we're facing. albeit in like a, 30 or 40-minute version. So the two shows are This Is Us, which I know is kind of like a phenomenon and, was pretty popular. I just watched it recently, so I'm kind of behind the curve. And then the other one is a show called Good Trouble. I don't know if you've heard of
Heard
it.
of it. I haven't seen it. I've heard of it. I don't even know what it's about.
It's about two foster siblings, sisters, who head to LA. They're kind of right out of college, and it's their first big foray into the world. And they both have various battles they have to fight with regards to sexism and gender inequality. And so, there's like those narratives. It's also very like light and fun, but they do address things like, how do we do inner work, and, how do we get out of codependent relationships, and
Mm.
how, as women, do we embody this sense of independence without denying our interdependence, and so
Mm.
yeah, so it's like layered. So yeah, I enjoyed those two shows. I thought they were relevant, and they, especially Good Trouble, both shows, but especially Good Trouble also was really um just illuminating on like LGBTQI plus individuals. They had very diverse casting, and I just love seeing like all of it. Like, this was not my experience growing up, at all in terms of the
Mhm.
media landscape. And so I'm just really enjoying seeing many more actors represented who are just from all of these different backgrounds. So I think that was a plus for that show too.
Very cool. I'm going to add that to the list. I've seen it maybe on Netflix or somewhere. I've seen the name and I thought, huh,
Hmm.
but there's just so much content now. So you really do
I
have to
know.
take a recommendation these days.
Oh my
Thank
God.
you. And This Is Us. You're probably the 11th guest who has offered that, truly. So, and
Yeah.
I am actually even further behind you because I have yet to watch it. I know I don't have to admit this every time someone mentions it on the podcast, but I usually do, that I haven't watched it yet. But I don't have TV, and I think it just finally came to streaming more recently. So
Hmm.
it's in the queue. But I that's one that I want to get to as well. So thank you. Well, it's been so wonderful, Andréana, to have
Mm.
you, to hear your inspiring, love filled words, and to learn about your journey and the important work you're doing and the people who are joining you on that journey and that process of doing the work to liberate themselves in all kinds of ways. So thank you
Mm.
for offering yourself to the
Mm.
world in that way. It's truly
Mm.
needed. And I think the way that you do it is with your own special touch. So
Mm.
it's an honor to get to know you and to hear and learn about your experiences. So thank you for being here again.
Oh, thank you, Tiffany. I can only really mirror back the gratitude and the mutual feeling of just having this wonderful conversation. I got to know you tiny bit. I hope to learn more about your journey and story going forward. But I'm so glad we're connected. And again, just thank you for holding this sacred and loving space for me where I felt really comfortable, sharing with you and voicing all the things that I did. So yeah, thank you so much. This is much needed, and I'm just excited for yeah, I'm excited for you and where these conversations go and who hears them. So thank you so much.